Hello, this is Jim McKeith, and welcome to this Enterprise Code Rage 2022 session on building microservices with Boss and Horse. I do want to point out that this presentation was a collaboration to myself and Vinicius Sanchez, who's part of the Hashload team. He put together a lot of the slides, and I think it's great. One of the reasons of doing this is because I want to help get better visibility on these projects that are from Brazil, and most content's in Portuguese. I want to get better visibility internationally and in English. Agenda, we're going to do a quick introduction and talk about Hashload community, some of the projects, specifically Boss and Horse, and then some demonstrations, show you the code and tell you where to learn more. So let's start with Hashload. I'm not going to read you all this. The slides are all available for you to download. Their links will be available. There was one at the beginning. There'll be another one at the end where you can download this. But essentially, it's a community of enthusiastic Delphi developers that said, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on. Let's see what we can do to improve Delphi and make it work great for a lot of the big tasks we're trying to accomplish. Founded by a group of developers in Brazil, but they have developers all around the world now. Most of the content, like I said, is in Portuguese, which is why I'm sharing this today in English. Here's the founders. There is Matthias and Rodrigo. I know I've met Rodrigo. I'm not sure if I met Matthias. I may have met both of them. I've been to Brazil a few times. There's honestly a ton of great development going on in Brazil. I've been learning Portuguese on Duolingo. You might want to consider the same. Here are some of the other Hashload members. There's Vinicius there, the one that helped me with collaboration on this, and a number of MVPs and other great people in the Delphi community down in Brazil. You can recognize most of them. And then here is more contributors, and this probably is outdated at this point. There's a lot of people involved in these projects, and it's open source. Potentially you could be involved as well. So go out, download it. The links, it's GitHub/Hashload. You can take a look at the projects and contribute, file bug reports, or just use it and give it a star. So some of the projects for Hashload. There's Boss, which we're going to talk about here shortly. It's a dependency manager. Horse, which is a fast, opinionated minimalist web framework for Delphi, along with dataset serialize, which is a JSON to dataset and dataset to JSON converter for Delphi, the REST request for Delphi, which is a library for Delphi to consume REST services created in other applications. There, both of those, there are similar things built into Delphi as well as other libraries out there, but worth noticing that they're out there. And bcrypt. Now, if you are storing passwords and do not know about bcrypt, go learn about bcrypt. Now, there are other things that are possibly replacements for bcrypt, but if you're not at least using bcrypt, please, 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 please go use bcrypt, whether it be the Hashload implementation or another one. And then a ORM-BR, which is an object relationship mapper for Delphi. So let's talk about Boss and Horse. Before I dive into this is my official disclaimer as the Embarcadero developer advocate, just because I know there's going to be people saying, hey, you're not talking about insert framework here. Yes, I know there's a lot of frameworks. This is a partial list. It's not a complete list. Gosh, there's over a dozen of them on there. There's a lot of frameworks out there. There's frameworks built into Rad Studio. There are a number of frameworks built into Rad Studio. There's commercial frameworks. There's open source frameworks. Yes, I know there's a lot of great frameworks out there. I'm not saying Boss or Horse are the best. I'm not saying you should use those. I'm saying they are noteworthy and they're not getting enough exposure because they're out of Brazil and a lot of the content's in Portuguese. So learn about them. Maybe put them in your tool belt. Maybe not. Maybe keep using the framework you're already using. That's the decision for you to make, not for me. But I do want to tell you about these. Boss is a dependency manager, a package manager for Delphi. Blurry between what the difference between the two is. But essentially, when you are managing your dependencies of your projects, on one project's pretty easy. A couple projects, not a big deal. But when you have multiple projects that have multiple dependencies with dependencies, it starts to get more complicated. The reason it's useful to talk about this in microservices is that if you have a lot of microservices that are talking to each other, they need to be using the same or compatible versions of their dependencies, because if they're not, they won't talk to each other. So when you're dealing with microservices, you're going to have a lot of projects. Those projects will be talking to each other. And Boss is a great way of making sure all of those dependencies are in sync. It's really nice. I really am a big fan of this. They have a number of IDE plugins as well. And I do have a full article that it'll be linked to from the blog post that is included in this. Once we have our dependency manager and we can manage our dependencies, that brings us to Horse. Horse is a Express inspired. So Express is a Node.js JavaScript framework for building web services that's for Delphi. It's designed to ease things up for fast development and minimalist way with high performance. This is getting a lot of use. I've talked to a number of developers all around the world who are using this. It has 807 stars on GitHub, which is pretty good. And after today, it's going to have a whole lot more. A quick example of the Hello World, the ping resource with the Pong response. Very simple. There's a lot of more code out there and stuff. We'll get into some of that in more detail. I do want to point out there's a Horse wizard that adds a project type into Rad Studio for you for making a new Horse project or Horse controller. It has this little dialog that lets you choose middlewares as well as set up some of the basics of your Horse application. So what is a middleware? I'm glad you asked. A middleware is what you add on to Horse to add additional functionality. So for example, here's a middleware basic auth for doing basic authentication. Sounds useful. Here's one for dealing with JSON objects. So middlewares are just functionality add on top. So this is one of the keys of this, is that you can use just the base Horse, or you can add the middlewares that make sense for you on top. And Boss makes it easy to automatically sync all of these middlewares and libraries up together for you. And there's a lot of third-party middlewares. Again, like I said, this is a pretty popular package. There's a lot of community developing around this. And we're going to look at some of these here later on as well. Horse is compatible with Linux and Windows, running on Linux and Windows, which means it's probably compatible on Android. I haven't tested that, but I would expect it probably is. And they have CGI, Apache, Asapi, so it'll work on Apache and Asapi. And they don't officially list Nginx, but I saw some other code by, I think it was Vinicius, on using Nginx. So it's possible, if you do a little effort, you could get it working on Nginx as well. I need to get that clarified. Actually, hopefully he's here answering questions and will comment on that. We're going to create a console application, which is great for testing and debugging, but obviously you're going to want to change out the DPR, the project, if you use the same unit files for production. In this case, we're not going to use any units, just going to put it all in the project file. And I'm going to start by saving this off because I'm going to use the console to save this. I'm going to make a new folder called test. And we'll call the project Horse _ test, because identifiers need an underscore, not a dash. Horse test. Now we have the DPR, the dproj, and the dproj.local. So I'm going to say Horse, because I have it on my path, init. Boss init. So I give the package a name. I'm just going to give it the default, which is the name of the folder we're in. Homepage is not really important unless you're publishing this package. Version number, again, not really important unless you're publishing it, but I'm bad if I can give it 1 point. I'll leave it as the default one because I'm not publishing this. And description also for publishing. Source folder. I'm going to use the current folder, although it is a good idea to use a subfolder like it's just here, like source or src or something. And there we go. It's created that JSON file. If I do here, I can actually look and see the other JSON file. Boss.lock is there, and cat boss JSON is there, which it just showed us the contents of. Now, if we come back into here, nothing has changed. It has not actually changed our project yet. But if we install a package, that's when it's going to update our project. So I'm going to go here and just show you project options. The Delphi compiler. Here, the search path is blank. Nothing's changed there. Let's install. This will work with any Git repository. I'm going to use GitHub/Hashload/. This time I'm using Boss, which is on my path to install Horse. Now I have a local cache that it copied that over from. So it went and checked on GitHub to see if GitHub had updated. It hadn't. So it just copied it from the local cache. If there was a change on GitHub, it would update that cache as well and download the latest. And because I did not specify a version of Horse, it used the latest version, which in this case is 3.0.2. Now, when I go back to Rad Studio, it says, hey, this has changed. Do you want to update? Say yes to all. Now, first thing to notice is if I come here and make a change to my project, add a platform, doesn't matter what platform I add, and then go back to Horse, I have not saved my changes. If I say boss or go back to boss, update, nothing to update, but it did touch the DPR and deproj, and I come back and it says, hey, those have been updated. But there's in-memory changes. So now you're stuck with a conundrum. Do you take what's on disk or in-memory changes? I take what's on disk, and now Linux is lost. But if I do want to add a platform, I'll come in here and say add Win64, and we'll add platform Linux as well. And we will save changes and then run update again. Completely unnecessary because nothing's changed. But we see it's reloaded, doesn't mention the in-memory changes. I hit yes, and it kept my changes this time. So what changed? What happened when I installed Horse as a dependency using Boss? If I come here to options, Delphi compiler, we can see that a search path has changed. And this is on the all right here. So the all platform search path has changed. So it means it affects all platforms. Now, what this means is that if there's differences between the Linux version and the Windows version, they're all pointing to the same source folder. And it's modules, DCP, DCU, modules, and Horse SRC. So if we go into our folder here, Horse test, we have a modules folder now. Here's the Horse. So it's copied, it's cloned this from GitHub into here from, like I said, from a local cache. You can also install the IDE plugin here. Lets you do some management as well. So that's available for you too. So now let's go ahead and make our simple, and we'll look at the source code here for the sample online and walk through making it here. But here's a simple Horse sample. Horse. So we're using Horse, obviously. And let me get rid of the code that's here. First thing we're going to do, Horse or thorse dot keep connection alive equals true. And thorse get pay. So we're setting up that we're going to respond to get on ping. Oops. Make some typos, of course. And we're using an anonymous method here, procedure. She'll just copy this over, so type that, so the signature out completely. And here's the anonymous method that's going to respond to the ping request. And we're going to say response dot send pong. And now we're going to say thorse dot listen. So we're going to tell it where to listen on what port 9000. And we're going to set up a callback. Is going to be, let's copy the signature again. Oh, this one's shorter. I could type. And so this is what's going to happen when it starts listening. So we're going to tell it the IP address and the port. So we're going to say horse dot host horse dot port. Oh, I misspelled forward, and I'm sure that Everybody's commenting on that now. Thank you. Format. Okay. And that's it. I think we're done. All right. So let's save that and we'll run it on Win32. And here it pops up in a console window because we made a console application. Firewall says, hey, you want to allow this? And I say, yep, let's allow it. So port or host and port, the default, which is where I'm at right now, is not defined because we didn't define that. We did define, however, ping. So if I go to the ping resource, we get the Pong response, which is what we expect. Not very exciting, but this is just a hello world for a REST service. This is ForceQuery. It's one of the third-party middlewares for Horse that makes it easy to work with the data set in JSON, which seems like, a useful thing to do. So let's take a look at this in action. I've downloaded the samples, and if we go into the samples folder here, we'll see that it only uses ForceQuery as a dependency. But ForceQuery, which is where the sample is located at, has other dependencies, Horse, JSON, or Johnson, and dataset serialize. And then if any of these had dependencies, it would download those too. So it gets dependencies of dependencies. So let's go ahead and see this in action here. I've downloaded here into the Horse dataset folder, the sample, and I've opened it here in the IDE. Notice all the red squigglies. That's because none of the dependencies are installed. We're going to say for boss update. So update's going to go out and download all the dependencies. I've cleared my local cache so you can see the actual process of it downloading all of the dependencies. So here's getting ForceQuery. And it's also downloading Horse, which Horse is the big one, so it takes a little while. And there's dataset serialization. And Johnson, what says Horse here again, it should be downloading Johnson, but it's downloading Johnson. Okay. And it's built all of those. So dataset serialized Horse, Johnson, and ForceQuery. So it downloaded all the pieces, put them in the right order, and updated my project file. So when I come back here, it says, hey, it's reloaded. It doesn't update until you make a change in the file, and then it removes all the red squigglies. I got here, project options, Delphi compiler, the default configuration for all platforms. And we see it's added all the different modules in here as well. So now we can build and run this. This says, hey, are you sure? We say yes, allow access. It's running on port 9000. So now I go here, go to port 9000. Not found. And that's because it's still using I think it's ping one. Ping. And there we go. There's our data set. Doesn't have many things in here, but we can point the REST debugger to it. So let's go to Ride Studio, Tools, REST debugger, and a localhost. Ping, send request, body, tabular data. There it is. The two IDs, 1 and 2, and the name of ping and pong, or value of ping and pong. Pretty straightforward. Let's take a look at the code. In the code here, we're registering a handler ping. Now I could change this to the default handler, which I'll do that right here in a second, so you can see that. And here we are creating a mem table. So this is all the mem table construction, which in your scenario would probably be going out and hitting a database and not needing to actually create the mem table. And then here we're just returning the FD mem table in the response. So this is the main code here. So whatever this code is going to be you querying a server, and this code, and then you're going to have this line here to send that back to the client. Let's go ahead and run this here on the default one. Oh, it's probably still running. All right, then it'll come back in here, and I'll just say the default, and there it is. So ping is no longer defined. The default one is. Makes it a little somewhere. But you could have it on any resource you want. Or most likely the default might be a list of resources. Now, most likely you're very excited about this. We saw some cool stuff. So if you're interested in learning more about Hashload, you can follow the project. They have a YouTube channel, Telegram, Discord, and GitHub. And here are some links. Again, all of these will be available at this first link here, which is the blogs.embarcadero link. The slides can be downloaded and a link to additional resources. A lot of this is in Portuguese. I do have an article version of Starting with Boss. It will be linked there in English, and there'll be more English resources coming in the near future. And with that, we're going to do some Q&A, and hopefully Vinicius and some other members of the Hashload team are on here to help with the questions as well. Okay, I will leave this up here so you can grab this. That didn't really work. There we go. If you haven't grabbed the link yet, although I did put the link in the chat, I'll put it in here again. If you want to go grab the slides, I will update that with some more details in the blog post. We're not all there yet, but there does have the slides download is available there. This was kind of short intro to Boss and Horse. Hopefully they give the basic ideas of this. I had some other demos I was going to get into, but just didn't have time, which is unfortunately how it goes. Few people on here. Oh, I'm getting an error here on the page. The chat reset on me. So if you typed a question in the chat, go ahead and type it in again because I just lost all the chat history. But if you have any comments or questions, I saw a few people that were big fans of Horse and Boss chiming in on there. It is the
chat, Jim, so I can probably get some of them to come up. Apart from lots of people saying things like this, "Go Horse!" There's a lot of they seem to have their own supporters club. A lot of people saying very similar things.
Yeah, I'd seen a lot of people in Brazil using Horse and being big fans of it, and like I said, there's a lot of other options out there. But then I saw people in Europe were also using it, so it is not a Portuguese Brazil only.
I've used it as well. Yeah, I've used it as well. I used it for a little microservice. I can't remember what it was for, but I was just looking for the easiest way to serve up this stuff, and Horse came up. And I'm like, oh, I hadn't heard of this, and I used it, and it just uses an anonymous procedure, and the thing just worked. It was great. So, yeah, what can you say? It's an interesting system. And people saying Delphi is the best. Yes, we agree. I think that is definitely the case. Yeah, we're kind of biased, but yeah. I'm just thinking through any other questions. No, I think those are the ones I saw. And you put that up as well, didn't you? Building microservices with Boss and Horse. That was the thing. Yeah, I like it. I've seen Boss mentioned a few times on some GitHub repos. Actually, seems to be gaining a little bit of popularity. People saying, "Hey, use Boss," which is interesting.
Oh, I'm using it in some of the Python packages that I'm working with Lucas on developing. We use Boss.
Maybe that's where I've seen it. Yeah, perhaps I've seen.
There is a issue where we have some dependencies that are packages, and the way Boss is currently set up, it doesn't compile for all the platforms, put everything in the root of across all platforms. And so if you're wanting to target multiple platforms, and in our case we use packages, and the packages need to be compiled for each platform, it doesn't precompile those and set the it also recompiles to DCUs each time as well. So it's not ideal for that situation, but I think it's something that hopefully will get fixed in the near future. We're trying to work with the Hashload team for that. But it is nice. It does do a lot of great things. It simplifies the dependencies for most situations. Just for us, where we're installing packages for multiple platforms, it ran into a couple corner cases. So, and I have a rather involved document called "Getting Started with Delphi's Boss" that is linked to from the blog post, and I'll put the direct link in the chat here again as well. That has a lot of details on working with Boss, and so you can check that out. And I'll be continuing to expand that and then turn it into a blog post. It's kind of a draft stage right now, but there's a few headers you'll see that I don't have any content in yet because I'm still working on those. This is a comment here about FGX natives. Unfortunately, I don't. He's not around right now, so I don't know. It might be he might have a backlog. Might have got a lot of attention and maybe doing those emails manually. So I was just waiting until tomorrow and then maybe try contacting their support. How does it perform when connecting to several databases for Horse? So I did not test that scenario, but it the tricky Ian, you feel free to comment on this if you have any things on this, but the thing that you're going to run into the situation is that you have to, and Dahlia mentioned this in the session earlier on multi-threading. Each request coming into Horse is its own thread, okay, in its own session. And so you have to create a new instance of the components that are connecting to it. And so you can use connection pooling and stuff like that to speed things up on the database level, but the component that connects to the database, I showed the example with the mem table. It created the mem table right there. So it'd be something similar to that, although it'd be creating a mem table and then just putting some SQL in there. So if you're doing multiple databases, I mean, it depends on how you have it configured.
Yeah, MicroOLAPs, their components for MySQL definitely have a threaded version or thread safe version, I think. It's the same problem you get with writing modules for web apps anyway, that once you start to get multi-threaded with databases, you can get locking problems because if you start things like transactions and stuff like that, then it can get very messy very quickly.
You can make it perform well with multiple databases, but you can also make it perform poorly with multiple databases.
Yeah. Dahlia's book is all about how badly things can go wrong when you get it wrong. Yes, and how stressful it can be. Yeah. So Martha's talking about Miguel, by the way.
I just messaged Miguel. He's going to be joining us on the Q&A. I just got a hold of him. We're doing a panel next, so.
I didn't want to hassle him as well because I was asking how. Oh, do you mean this one? Go message him. There's no escaping from us, Miguel. We will get you. Yeah, it's been an interesting first day. I think we've had quite a few people turn up and watch what's going on, and we've had some questions. Usually with this thing, we get a lot more views afterwards. I think the replays tend to be where we really hit the numbers quite heavily. So those people that are watching replays, I'm sorry you can't take part in the Q&A live, but you should register and join in, and then you can. I know it's difficult with time zones. Dave Nottage, for example, he's in Australia, and he always complains that it's always at like 4 a.m. for him. Poor guy.
Yeah.
He's a really great MVP, and unfortunately, he chose the wrong part of the world to be born. So, yes, he's on the other side of the planet, literally.
Yeah, actually, Dave is. I've had him show up to some events we've done online at like really bizarre hours. He's a good
armed
guy.
with a lot of caffeine. Yes.
Spirit of Delphi Award winner for was it last year? Year before.
2020. It was the year before. Yeah, I've done a couple of webinars for Australian user groups and things like that. And, oh boy, it's a killer. Yes.
So there's a question here. In Horse, are data modules created per request? So it doesn't have to be. You would need to create your. So you can have a data module that's not created per request, or you can have data modules that are created per request. It depends on how you set it up. But you do need to have your query component created per request. Although there are probably other ways around that. Read Dahlia's book.
She goes in depth into those things, and the thing about Dahlia's book, I mean, she's an MVP, so we're kind of promoting her because she writes about the product that we use. But she's a very, very smart person, Dahlia, and I've got a lot of respect for her. If you read her book, it's stuff that I don't think I'm that bad at what I do. I think I know a thing or two, and I don't know everything. I always say, nobody does know everything, but I know enough. And reading through her book, you're like, oh, I didn't know that. It's people. Some people just really think these things through, don't they, to the nth degree, and it's amazing. She's a pretty smart person. But yeah,
Well,
data
it's one of those.
modules.
What were you gonna say? Go ahead.
Yeah, data modules. Yes, re-entrancy is a big problem in multitasking and multi-threading, and databases. The database itself has got to be thread safe, because MySQL actually, they have different versions for some that are thread safe and some that aren't. I don't know. Maybe it's a subject in itself that we perhaps need to look at. No Pain, No Gain says a big greeting to our Brazilian brothers and sisters, presumably. Horse will be the best lib and framework for open source Delphi server side. We don't forget DMVC framework. Both are strong and solid and fast. Yeah, Brazil's a real hotspot for Delphi people. I mean, that's where the skier for our favorite gang, the Skier for Delphi crowd, hang out. Yeah, it's like having a little army, isn't it, Jim? They're just, hey,
Yeah.
hello, Ian, how you doing? I'm like, yeah, it's amazing, really. How much goes on. And South Africa's another hotspot where there are a ton of people there, very enthusiastic. So it's great to come across them.
And your comment about Brazilian brothers and sisters. When I was down in Brazil at the conference down there, they had over 600 developers at the conference, and it was noticeable that there was a good mix of people of different ages, men and women. I mean, unfortunately, our industry is dominated by gray-haired, bearded men like myself. But Brazil was definitely Brazil has definitely had really good representation, which was fantastic to see.
Yeah, Germany also, I think, has got quite a diverse selection of age ranges and things like that as well. So it's good. But yeah, I mean, you and I both come from an era where it was much more of a hacker culture in the old-fashioned sense, and I think that it suited lonely teenage boys learning about that rather than well-educated women who went off and said, hey, this would be an industry I'd follow. And so if you're a bit of a geeky kind of loner, then computer science was the thing for you, I think, and back in the 80s and the 70s and that.
So Antonio pointed out that you can use the FD Manager to manage connections. Yep, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And then there's a question here about Code Rage in general. Is there a blog or channel, etc.? So there was an email that had the schedule. You should have gotten it. That had the schedule in it. If you didn't, go register again, and that will have the schedule in it. And then everybody that got the email will get, or everybody that's registered will get the follow-up with links for replays and downloads and stuff like that as well. So if you're not registered and you just happen to discover this, go register. And I think we have
there was a little bit of a blip, wasn't there? We know of a couple of people who said they definitely registered, and we believe them. And they said they never got some links, and well, as soon as they registered again, they immediately got them. So not quite sure what went on there, but it's the internet for you.
It works 99% of the time.
Oh, this morning at 7 a.m. I was dealing with a mail server that was misbehaving. And change this DNS record. Oh, it'll work immediately. No, it won't, and then it will, and then it won't. Oh, great! Yes, it's the joys of technical interaction with computers. So yes, well, there you go. I think we've petered out on the questions. That's good.
Yeah, I definitely check it out. There's a lot of middlewares, and I tried to get into some more of them. I tried to do some other creative stuff and just didn't have time to put it all together. But there's a lot of stuff out there. In the blog post that I linked to, there is a links for some documentation as well. and just go out there and start poking around. All the middlewares I looked at had a samples folder that had a sample in it. You can go in there and run it. And because of Boss, it just installs all the dependencies and it's good to go. So it's great for getting going, get speed, and trying some things out. So yeah,
I think I came across Horse when I was doing some stuff to do with MQTT. Actually, funnily enough, it was some kind of little MQTT server that someone had written in Horse. Yeah, and it worked. It was good. It's quite easy, really. I mean, it's not. I think I didn't really look at the add-ons because I didn't know they existed. But I think with the add-ons, maybe there's something really worth looking at for me there for the future.
Yeah, there were a few things I was like, oh, I should figure out how to do JSON, and then I'm like, oh wait,
JWT. Yeah, JWT.
Yeah, a middleware for that, and sure enough, there was a middleware, and it just did it. I'm like, oh, but I want to do a data set. Oh, query middleware. There we go. So,
yeah. Well, there's a component for everything in Delphi sooner or later. It doesn't matter what it is.
It's true.
You can do it.
It's true. And this goes back to your comment you were saying about Dahlia's book, right? Is that you don't have to, we don't all have to be an expert in everything, right? Mm-hmm. But you can find someone else that made a component or wrote a book on the topic, and Dahlia spent hours and hours and hours poking in all the corners and then tells you the results, and you can read it, and then you can go and test that and say, oh, sure enough, that is correct. I'm a big believer in
I think Dahlia said before, I'm sure it was her, and forgive me, Dahlia, if I'm bad mouthing you here, but I think she said before she's not an expert on the user interfaces, but she is an expert on all the mechanics of actually getting to that point. The threading and the multi-threading. I think she really is quite amazing, in that respect. But whereas I can make the user interface do all the wonderful things, and then the threading will just fall into a big pile, and I'll sit there for days going, I'm so stupid. We all get days where we think you're the cleverest person in the world, and then immediately it comes crashing down around our ears, and we think we don't know anything. That's the joys of the job. The joys of the job. Yeah.
I shared this before, but I'll share it again. I cannot tell you how many times I've been trying to do something, and I'm like, I think this should be possible, and then I'll do a search, and I'll find an hour-long webinar I did on exactly that topic, and I'm like,
how could I
do this?
Yeah. I do this. I sometimes Google things and go, oh, here's a good article. Oh wait, I wrote it. Yeah, it's a bit frustrating. I copy and paste code from my demos from time to time when I've forgotten something. Yeah. Someone asked me a while ago how many webinars and articles I've done, and it's a lot, but I don't know. I mean, not as many as you, but it's quite a few. They add up. It's like Holger Flick. I mean, he just does tons and tons of them. He's not the only one, but Holger is a good friend of mine, and he just churns them out like he's making cakes. It's incredible.
Yeah. It's great. I don't know how many I've done either. I should count it up and how many conferences I've spoken and stuff. It's great. I love it so much, but it just is a lot to do sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how long an hour-long video takes to make if you're doing it properly, anyway.
Yeah. One year for Code Rage, I did a survey and asked all the presenters how much time they put into prepping the session, and just totaled it all up, and it was a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I do the audio, or I used to do. I haven't done it for a long while now, but the audio narration, and it's always for every hour of recorded audio, it's 4 hours of recording and editing. So for every audio book that you see that runs 10 hours, someone spent 40 hours on that book minimum, and that's when you're up to speed on it. If you're not up to speed on it, it can take even longer. So, and same with the videos. Is you and I were messaging before behind the scenes saying I go and edit out all the or the ones I can anyway. Some of them I talk too fast, but even that, you've got to go through and separate them out. And there's some tools to help, but none of them are particularly effective, unfortunately, at the moment.
When you start factoring in like the research and stuff, it's tons of hours.